A successful businessman meets a mysterious young woman on the street who gives him a medallion connected to her past. But as he unearths her family's secrets, he discovers that his life was never what it seemed, and that a hidden enemy could destroy it all. Night had fallen over the city, letting the lights of the buildings shine like stars on the ground. Lucas walked out of the restaurant, adjusting the collar of his coat to protect himself from the cold wind that ran through the empty streets. He had just finished a business dinner, sealing an important deal that would consolidate his company as a market leader. His mind was filled with figures, charts, and strategies, but something stopped him just as he reached his car. A small figure sat by the door of the restaurant, wrapped in a worn coat that barely protected her body from the cold. Her eyes, large and dark, looked at him with a mixture of need and caution. "Do you have anything to eat?" the young woman asked, her voice barely audible over the distant noise of traffic. Lucas hesitated for a moment. He didn't usually get involved with strangers, much less in circumstances like this. But something about her unnerved him. She was young, no more than 17, and her face showed a weariness that seemed too heavy for someone her age. Finally, she sighed and said, "Wait here." He returned to the restaurant and ordered a takeout. When he returned, he handed her the bag of food. The young woman took the package with trembling hands, muttering a barely audible, "Thank you." But before Lucas could turn and leave, she pulled something out of her pocket and held it out to him. "Take it," she said, looking at him with an intensity that disarmed him. It was a small medallion made of ancient metal with an intricate design that looked like it had been carved by hand. Lucas frowned as he examined it. There was something familiar about it, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. "Why are you giving me this?" he asked, bewildered. The young woman watched him for a long moment before answering, as if she were evaluating his words. "I was waiting for you," he said finally, in a tone that seemed loaded with meaning. Before Lucas could say anything else, the young woman stood up and disappeared into the shadows of the street. For a moment he thought about following her, but something stopped him. His heart was pounding, and the medallion in his hand seemed to burn, as if it held secrets waiting to be discovered. When he finally got into his car, he couldn't stop looking at the object in his hand. The city lights reflected off the metal surface, and the feeling of familiarity didn't fade. She was leaving him. As he drove to his apartment, a nagging question settled in his mind. Who was this young woman, and why did he feel like his life had just changed forever? The locket spun between Lucas's fingers as the morning sun filtered through the blinds of his office. He hadn't slept well. The image of the young woman kept appearing in his mind, along with those enigmatic words. "I was waiting for you." There was something disturbing and familiar about it all. He couldn't ignore it. He placed the medallion on his desk and studied it closely. It was heavy, made of dark metal, with a design that showed an intricate pattern of intertwined branches, and in the center, a faint engraving that was barely discernible. It looked like an ancient shield or emblem. Something in his memory sparked, but the memory did not quite materialize. Lucas leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes to try to concentrate. Suddenly, flashes of his childhood invaded his mind. His father, always with a serious expression, used to disappear for long periods of time. Once he had seen him keep something very similar to that medallion in a safe, making sure that no one was watching. But Lucas, curious by nature, had spied from the corner of the room. It was impossible to forget that worried look on his father's face. "Mr. Lucas," the voice of Helena, his efficient assistant, brought him out of his thoughts. "Come in, Helena." Lucas straightened his back and put the medallion in his pocket, as if he were afraid someone might see it. Helena entered with her usual professionalism, carrying a folder of documents. However, she immediately noticed Lucas's restless expression. She had been working alongside him for years and rarely saw him like this. "Everything okay?" "You seem distracted," he said, placing the papers on the table. Lucas hesitated for a moment before taking out the medallion and showing it to her. "Have you seen anything like this before?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Helena leaned over to examine him, frowning. Her reaction was immediate, a mixture of surprise and something that seemed to be recognition. "It's old. But no, I've never seen anything like it." He paused, thinking. "Although, there's an antique dealer downtown who might be able to help you. He's known for his knowledge of historical artifacts. I can schedule an appointment for you." Lucas nodded gratefully, but he couldn't help but notice the slight hesitation in Helena's voice, as if she wasn't telling him everything. He decided not to insist, at least for now. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of meetings and emails, but her mind kept returning to the medallion. That night in her apartment, she turned on her computer and tried to search for information online. The results were few, but a similar symbol he was found to be associated with an organization that had existed decades before. A secret society linked to rumors of disappearances and family secrets. A shiver ran through her body. It was as if each answer brought with it more questions. He looked at his phone and thought about the young woman. He didn't know how, but he was sure she had more answers. He decided to look for her the next day. Something inside him told him that this meeting had not been a coincidence. The locket, cold in his hand, seemed to pulse with a purpose Lucas couldn't yet understand. The bustle of the city surrounded him as Lucas walked toward the place where he had last seen the young woman. The medallion in his pocket seemed like a constant weight, as if urging him on. He had spent the morning visiting the antique dealer Helena had recommended, but he could only confirm what he had already suspected. The medallion was unique and very old, probably linked to a select family or group. After hours of searching, he finally found her. Marina was sitting on the steps of an abandoned church, her thin arms wrapped around her legs as she stared absent-mindedly at the horizon. Lucas stopped in front of her, his shadow covering the small figure. "We need to talk," he said firmly, trying not to sound authoritarian. Marina looked up, her dark eyes assessing him for a moment before nodding. Without a word, she followed him to a nearby cafe. They chose a table in a secluded corner, and Lucas ordered 2 cups of tea, though Marina seemed more interested in watching him than drinking anything. "How did you get this?" Lucas asked directly, placing the medallion on the table. Marina looked at him with a mixture of caution and resignation. Her slender fingers caressed the rim of the cup before answering. "Someone who knew your father gave it to me," he said finally. Lucas's heart skipped a beat. He leaned forward, unable to hide his impatience. "Who? Where is that person now?" he asked urgently. "He died 2 years ago," Marina answered, looking down. "But before he did, he told me many things. He told me that he would find the owner of the medallion, that you were the key to unearthing a truth that had been buried for decades." Lucas leaned back in his chair, trying to process what he had just heard. He had spent years avoiding thinking about his father, about the mystery of his disappearance. Now it seemed like it was all coming back to him in a way he couldn't ignore. "What else do you know?" he pressed, his voice softer this time. Marina watched him silently before answering. "I know your father didn't disappear by accident. He was involved in something big, something I still don't fully understand. But I'm sure this medallion is the key." He paused, then added, "And I also know that there are people who don't want you to discover the truth." A chill ran through Lucas. The intensity in Marina's eyes made him realize she wasn't making anything up. Although he didn't fully understand it, he knew at that moment that he couldn't leave her on the street. It was too dangerous both for her and for the secrets she kept. "You will stay at my house." "It is the least I can do," he said with determination. Marina looked at him, surprised by his offer, but nodded slowly. That night, as they drove home, Lucas noticed that the lights of a car seemed to be following them closely. A feeling of uneasiness settled in his chest. He was just beginning to uncover the truth, but he could already sense that danger was lurking. Lucas's house was located in an exclusive neighborhood, surrounded by well-kept gardens and a high wall that guaranteed privacy. Entering, Marina paused in the lobby, staring in awe at the discreet luxury that surrounded her. She had spent years surviving on the streets, and this world of shiny marble and designer furniture seemed like something out of a movie. She didn't say anything, though, just stood there, hugging her tattered backpack. Lucas showed her a guest room, simple but cozy. While Marina left her few belongings on the bed, Lucas closed the door and headed to his study, where Helena was waiting for him. She had arrived for a last-minute meeting, clearly uncomfortable with the house's new resident. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Helena asked, crossing her arms. "You don't know anything about her, Lucas. She could be lying, or worse, using you. I know, but I also know that he has information about my father. Lucas squeezed the medallion in his hand, as if it gave him strength. I can't ignore this, Helena, not after everything he's told me. Helena sighed, resigned. Although she was not convinced, she knew that Lucas was stubborn. Her loyalty to him made her remain silent, at least for the moment. Meanwhile, Marina, from her bedroom window, noticed something unusual. A black car was parked in front of the house with its headlights off. A figure inside seemed to be staring straight out the window. His instincts, honed by years of surviving on the streets, screamed at him that something was not right. She quickly ran down the stairs and found Lucas in the study. "There's someone outside," he said without preamble. Lucas tensed and looked at Helena, who took out her phone to call security. Upon reaching the gate, the guards found no trace of the car. However, Lucas couldn't ignore the feeling that something was very wrong. That night, the atmosphere in the house was tense. Marina lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her room, while Lucas sifted through documents related to his father's past. He found an old folder containing business reports and personal letters. One in particular caught his attention. It was addressed to his mother and mentioned a risky pact his father had made to protect the family. Although the words were vague, the tone of urgency was unmistakable. On the other hand, Augusto, Lucas's main rival in the business world, was in his office reviewing a recent report. He had received information about the connection between Lucas and a mysterious young woman who now lived in his house. A collaborator of his had been following Lucas's movements, and although he did not yet have all the details, he knew that he had found an opportunity to destabilize him. "Who is this girl?" Augusto asked his assistant, passing a blurry photograph of Marina. "I want everything about her, and fast." The apparent calm in Lucas's life was about to shatter. Between the impending danger and the tensions within his inner circle, it was only a matter of time before things fell apart. Morning came, but the tension in Lucas's house did not go away. Marina had barely slept, and Lucas, although more accustomed to stress, had not managed to find peace either. After breakfast, they decided to go through some old documents together that Lucas had found in his father's folder. Marina, with her intuition and innate curiosity, seemed to notice details that Lucas had overlooked. In one of the letters, they found a reference to a name that Marina immediately recognized: Samuel Rocha. "I met him when I was a child," Marina said, pointing at the name with her finger. "He took care of me after my mother died. He was the one who gave me the medallion and told me about your family." Lucas looked at her puzzled. The mention of Samuel seemed to open a new avenue of questions. He decided to call a private investigator to look for information about him. However, Marina did not seem to fully trust the idea. "Samuel always said that there were dangerous people watching him. I don't think he was someone easy to track down," he added with a warning tone. While Lucas was processing the new information, Helena, who had arrived early, tried not to look too worried, but it was clear that Marina's presence made her uncomfortable. Her doubts began to dissipate when Marina, looking through an old photo album that Lucas had brought from his office, pulled out a photograph that seemed insignificant at first. It was a picture of a group of people, taken at a business event years ago. Marina pointed to a figure in the background of the photo. "That's Samuel, I'm sure." Her voice trembled with a mixture of excitement and nostalgia. Lucas moved closer, studying the photograph. His father was in the center of the image, smiling for the camera, and sure enough, behind him was an older man with familiar features. The discovery reinforced the idea that Samuel had been a key figure in the mystery surrounding his father. Meanwhile, Augusto intensified his investigations into Marina. He had discovered that she had no clear records, no fixed address, no documented family history. This intrigued him even more. He hired a specialized team to investigate her past, convinced that he could use her connection with Lucas to publicly destabilize him. Back at the house, Marina seemed more comfortable, though still alert. In a quiet moment, Lucas decided to be honest with her. "I can't promise you that this will be easy, Marina," he said in a serious tone. "But I promise you that I will find out the truth about Samuel, my father, about all of this." Marina looked at him, and for the first time since she met him, a slight smile appeared on her face. "I'm not alone this time," she replied softly. That night, as they continued to review documents, Lucas felt something he hadn't experienced in years: a genuine connection. Marina wasn't just a stranger in his life. There was something in their history, in their memories, that made him feel like they were destined to meet. But in the shadows, Augusto was preparing his move. With the information he had obtained about Marina and her past, he knew he could soon strike where it would hurt Lucas the most: his credibility and his family secrets. The next morning began with an eerie calm in Lucas's house, but it wouldn't last long. While they were drinking coffee in the living room, Helena burst in, pale-faced, holding a tablet in her hand. "Lucas, you have to see this," he said urgently. On the screen, an article from a news portal showed a blurry photograph of Marina leaving Lucas's house, accompanied by sensational headlines that they suggested that he was harboring a fugitive. The article also hinted at irregularities in his family's business dealings, especially involving his father. Lucas gritted his teeth, his mind already associating this attack with Augustus. "This is his doing," he muttered, referring to his rival. Marina, who had been reading over Helena's shoulder, sank into the couch. Her hands shook as she tried to process what it meant to be exposed like that. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I never wanted you to get into trouble because of me." Lucas shook his head, determined. "This isn't your fault. Augustus wants to attack me, and you're a perfect excuse for doing so. But I won't let you be used against me." However, the situation was far from being under control. For the next few hours, the phones in Lucas's office rang off the hook. Investors demanded explanations, and some were already threatening to withdraw their support. Helena tried to manage the crisis, but she couldn't prevent her discomfort with Marina from resurfacing. "Lucas, we need to talk alone," she said when she finally managed to pull him away from Marina. In her office, Helena closed the door behind her and took a breath before speaking. "I can't keep hiding this from you. I know more about your father's disappearance than I told you before." Lucas stared at her, his expression darkening. "What do you mean?" "Years ago, when I started working for you, I found documents related to your last transaction. They were confusing, but they mentioned names of people who later disappeared. Samuel Rocha was among them. I thought it wasn't my place to tell you anything. But now..." Helena paused, looking down. "Augusto also knows about those documents. I think he has copies." The revelation hit Lucas like a hammer. Not only was he facing a public crisis, but he now knew that Helena, someone he trusted completely, had withheld vital information. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" he asked, his voice low but laden with disappointment. "I wanted to protect you. I thought it was best not to bring up the past," Helena replied, almost in a whisper. Before Lucas could respond, a notification on his phone caught his attention. It was an anonymous message with a link to a video that showed footage of Marina arguing with someone on the streets years ago. The video was edited to make her look like a violent person, someone who was not trustworthy. Alongside the video, a message: "This is just the beginning." Helena's betrayal and Augustus's public attack combined to leave Lucas in a critical position. He looked at the medallion on his desk as if it might provide a solution. He knew the only way forward was to uncover the whole truth, however painful, and confront Augustus before he finished destroying him. Lucas knew he was running out of time. With the pressure from the media, investors, and Helena's betrayal still weighing on his mind, he dove headlong into the old documents in his possession. As Marina helped him organize the letters and photographs, he found something he hadn't noticed before: an old sealed envelope with his father's name handwritten on it. He carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a legal document that looked like an unofficial will, and next to it, a letter. In it, his father described deep regret for the mistakes he had made and confessed something that left Lucas paralyzed. He had fathered a child out of wedlock. That child, according to the letter, was a girl named Marina. Lucas slowly lowered the letter and looked at Marina, who was still absorbed in going through papers. His mind was racing. Was it possible that this young woman, whom he had only met a few days ago, was his sister? He decided not to say anything right away. He needed more proof. "I'm going out for a moment," he announced, putting the letter in his pocket. Marina looked at him curiously but didn't ask. Lucas went to a trusted friend's private forensic laboratory. There he asked for a DNA test to be performed on a sample he had discreetly taken from Marina's toothbrush. As he waited for the results, his mind was conflicted. If the revelation was true, it meant that Marina was part of his family. But it also meant that his father had been leading a double life and had hidden everything, even from his mother. Hours later, the analysis came back. Marina was his half-sister. Lucas sat silently, staring at the report. While the discovery brought answers, it also opened a deep wound in his heart. That night when he returned home, he found Marina sitting on the sofa, looking at an old photograph of Samuel Rocha that they had found. When he came in, she looked at him with a mixture of sadness and hope. "Did you know that my mother worked for your family?" he asked suddenly. "She never told me who my father was, but she always told me about a man who had a big heart, but also many secrets." Lucas sat next to her, trying to gather his thoughts. "Marina, I think we're siblings." The words were out before she could stop herself. She stared at him with wide eyes in surprise. Her silence was long, but she finally spoke. "I always felt connected to you ever since I saw you. I didn't know why, but I felt it." He paused as if trying to process everything. "What now?" Lucas sighed. He knew the discovery was just the beginning. They still had to face Augusto's threats, his father's buried secrets, and the potential consequences of all this coming to light. That same night, while Marina was sleeping, Lucas received an anonymous call. "We know what you discovered. If you want to protect her, you'll have to make sacrifices." The call was cut off before he could answer. Danger was closer than ever, and Lucas knew that the coming battle would be decisive. The tension was palpable as Lucas prepared for the annual gala event hosted by his company. Normally, these kinds of events were an opportunity to show strength in front of investors and competitors, but tonight was different. He knew Augusto wouldn't waste the opportunity to expose him publicly. The discovery that Marina was his half-sister and the constant threats had put him in a precarious position, but it had also given him new determination. Lucas arrived at the living room impeccably dressed, but with the weight of the medallion in his pocket. Helena accompanied him, maintaining an appearance of calm, although her loyalty had been called into question. Marina, at Lucas's insistence, remained at home under the surveillance of a security team. The event began like any other: speeches, toasts, and meetings with important figures in the business world. But Lucas knew that the storm was approaching. Halfway through the night, Augusto made his appearance, greeting those present with his characteristic calculating smile. He carried an air of confidence that only intensified Lucas's concern. "Enjoying the night, Lucas?" Augusto asked when he finally caught up with him. "So far, yes. Although it seems that you are too anxious about something," Lucas replied coldly. Augustus smiled broadly and with a casual gesture pointed to the stage. "Oh, it's nothing. I just thought this would be the perfect night to share some truths with everyone here." Before Lucas could answer, Augusto stepped onto the stage and called for the guests' attention. On the large screen behind him, images appeared. Marina's photograph in the streets, the doctored video of her in a fight, and even excerpts from the documents Lucas had discovered about his father. The room fell deathly silent. Our host, Lucas Andrade, has been hiding more than just financial numbers. Apparently, he has also been covering up his family's sins and protecting a criminal. Augusto's voice rang with venom. Lucas felt like every word was piercing his reputation. But instead of standing still, he walked toward the stage with a firm step. Once in front of the microphone, he pulled the medallion out of his pocket and held it up. "It's true that my family has a complicated past, and I'm not going to deny it. But this medallion represents something more than mistakes. It represents the truth that many of you have ignored for years." The audience watched him expectantly. Augusto here has used my family as a weapon for his personal gain. But what he didn't mention is that he himself was involved in shady dealings with my father, dealings that contributed to his disappearance. Lucas took out a copy of the documents that incriminated Augusto and showed them on the screen. The turn of events surprised everyone. Augusto tried to defend himself, but the evidence was overwhelming. Lucas ended his speech with a promise: to turn his company into a vehicle for social change, inspired by Marina and the challenges she had faced. Applause filled the room as Augusto was escorted away by security, his reputation in tatters. Although Lucas had won that battle, he knew the consequences were just beginning. The next few days I confront each other intensely. Embora Lucas Tevez exposed Augusto and turned the game in the gala, as the consequences began to manifest themselves quickly. Some investors, wary of the repercussions of the scandal, will withdraw their contributions. His team was divided between those who admired his transparency and those who feared the company's financial future. Lucas, however, remains firm. He knew he couldn't go back on his promise to move. Inspired by Marina's story and the challenges she faced to protect her family, he decided to transform his company into something greater than just a lucrative business. We met with the main leaders of your organization and presented your vision. From now on, our mission will be more than generating profits. We will invest in social programs for young people in vulnerable situations. We are going to transform lives like Marina transformed Amina. His voice was firm but filled with emotion. The room was silent for a few seconds before Helena, even redeeming herself from her mistakes, started to applaud. In a few years, other leaders will follow their example, but some still seem skeptical. Meanwhile, Marina also faced moving. After everything happened, I felt a mixture of gratitude and confusion. Now I knew that Lucas was his brother, but he still struggled to live up to the idea of belonging to a family after so many years of living together. One afternoon, while walking through the gardens of the house, Marina opened her heart. "Lucas, I don't know if I'm ready for everything. Family, responsibilities. I never had anything different before." Lucas smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "It also wasn't soon when everything came. But we met for a reason, Marina, and now we have a chance to rebuild, or it was lost." Lucas arrived at the living room impeccably dressed, but with the weight of the medallion in his pocket. Helena accompanied him, maintaining an appearance of calm, although her loyalty had been called into question. Marina, at Lucas's insistence, remained at home under the surveillance of a security team. The event began like any other: speeches, toasts, and meetings with important figures in the business world. But Lucas knew that the storm was approaching. Halfway through the night, Augusto made his appearance, greeting those present with his characteristic calculating smile. He carried an air of confidence that only intensified Lucas's concern. "Enjoying the night, Lucas?" Augusto asked when he finally caught up with him. "So far, yes. Although it seems that you are too anxious about something," Lucas replied coldly. Augustus smiled broadly and with a casual gesture pointed to the stage. "Oh, it's nothing. I just thought this would be the perfect night to share some truths with everyone here." Before Lucas could answer, Augusto stepped onto the stage and called for the guests' attention. On the large screen behind him, images appeared. Marina's photograph in the streets, the doctored video of her in a fight, and even excerpts from the documents Lucas had discovered about his father. The room fell deathly silent. Our host, Lucas Andrade, has been hiding more than just financial numbers. Apparently, he has also been covering up his family's sins and protecting a criminal. Augusto's voice rang with venom. Lucas felt like every word was piercing his reputation. But instead of standing still, he walked toward the stage with a firm step. Once in front of the microphone, he pulled the medallion out of his pocket and held it up. "It's true that my family has a complicated past, and I'm not going to deny it. But this medallion represents something more than mistakes. It represents the truth that many of you have ignored for years." The audience watched him expectantly. Augusto here has used my family as a weapon for his personal gain. But what he didn't mention is that he himself was involved in shady dealings with my father, dealings that contributed to his disappearance. Lucas took out a copy of the documents that incriminated Augusto and showed them on the screen. The turn of events surprised everyone. Augusto tried to defend himself, but the evidence was overwhelming. Lucas ended his speech with a promise: to turn his company into a vehicle for social change, inspired by Marina and the challenges she had faced. Applause filled the room as Augusto was escorted away by security, his reputation in tatters. Although Lucas had won that battle, he knew the consequences were just beginning. The next few days I confront each other intensely. Embora Lucas Tevez exposed Augusto and turned the game in the gala, as the consequences began to manifest themselves quickly. Some investors, wary of the repercussions of the scandal, will withdraw their contributions. His team was divided between those who admired his transparency and those who feared the company's financial future. Lucas, however, remains firm. He knew he couldn't go back on his promise to move. Inspired by Marina's story and the challenges she faced to protect her family, he decided to transform his company into something greater than just a lucrative business. We met with the main leaders of your organization and presented your vision. From now on, our mission will be more than generating profits. We will invest in social programs for young people in vulnerable situations. We are going to transform lives like Marina transformed Amina. His voice was firm but filled with emotion. The room was silent for a few seconds before Helena, even redeeming herself from her mistakes, started to applaud. In a few years, other leaders will follow their example, but some still seem skeptical. Meanwhile, Marina also faced moving. After everything happened, I felt a mixture of gratitude and confusion. Now I knew that Lucas was his brother, but he still struggled to live up to the idea of belonging to a family after so many years of living together. One after, Marina did not respond immediately, but her voice seemed more serene. A few years ago, you started to find your place. You accompanied Lucas at meetings about the new social programs and suggested ideas based on your own experience on the streets. Lucas realizes that, despite her insecurity, Marina has a strength and a knowledge that she could make a difference. However, the challenges will not end there. Augusto's movements still cause repercussions. He used allies in strategic positions to make it difficult to implement Lucas's new projects. Diso, the press continued to explore the scandal, painting Lucas now as a visionary, now as someone who suffers from guilt. Lucas knew he was at a crossroads. He could give up, focus only on saving his company, or continue on the path he had chosen, even though this would mean sacrificing even more. That night, sitting at his desk with a medal on his hand, Lucas remembered Marina's words. "I'm never alone now." He knew that, despite all his losses, he had gained something invaluable, a true connection and a purpose. Decided, I convened a press group the next day. Before the cameras, he presented his new foundation, dedicated to helping young people like Marina. Despite the criticism, his voice is not trembling. It does not matter what happens, what is necessary to build a better future for everyone. The conference room was full of energy, young people from different social backgrounds, entrepreneurs interested in collaborating, and curious media had gathered for the official opening of the foundation created by Lucas. Marina was sitting in the front row, proudly watching her brother walk up on stage. "Today marks the beginning of a new era," Lucas said into the microphone, with a firm voice and a serene smile. "This is not just a business project. It is a promise that no one will be ignored, that everyone has a chance to build a better future." Applause filled the room. Marina, like many of those present, couldn't help but get emotional. Seeing Lucas transform into someone who prioritized people over numbers inspired her deeply. But it wasn't just him who had changed. Marina had also turned her life around. Over the past few weeks, she had begun to become actively involved in the organization. She worked directly with programs focused on vulnerable youth, using her own experience as a guide to understand their needs. Her connection with them was immediate, and the youth found in her not only a mentor, but also an example of resilience. At the end of the event, Marina approached Lucas, who was surrounded by collaborators and journalists. "You did something amazing today," he said with a warm smile. "I didn't do it alone," Lucas replied, looking at her with gratitude. "You were the reason this all started." The days that followed were filled with work and planning. The foundation began to operate strongly, and although Lucas still faced financial challenges, his priorities were clear. He reduced the scope of some divisions of his company to ensure that resources were allocated to social programs, a decision that initially generated criticism, but over time earned the respect of many. Marina, for her part, decided to take things a step further. Inspired by the changes in her life and the impact of the foundation, she began studying business administration and psychology, with the dream of leading her own project one day. Lucas supported her unconditionally, making sure she had everything she needed to achieve her goals. One afternoon, while going through documents in Lucas's office, Marina found a sealed envelope among her father's things. It looked forgotten and worn by time. Upon opening it, they discovered a letter written in his own handwriting. In it, he mentioned that he had faked his disappearance to protect his family from outside threats. Although the letter did not give specific details, it suggested that he might still be alive. The discovery left them both silent. Marina looked at Lucas with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "Do you think that—" Lucas nodded slowly, though his thoughts were a whirl. "If he is alive, we will find him. But now, we have to continue building what he left behind." The letter was a reminder that their family's story was not yet complete. As they both prepared to face the future, they knew the road would be difficult, but also full of possibilities. Lucas and Marina had found more than just answers. They had found hope and purpose. The locket, now a symbol of their union, rested on the desk, a constant reminder that even in the midst of chaos, there is always a new beginning. Lucas's story reminds us that sometimes the greatest challenges in life lead us to discover what really matters: family, truth, and purpose. But it also poses a profound question. What would you do if you discovered that your past held secrets that could change your life completely? Would you be able to face them, even if it meant losing everything? Or would you rather leave them buried to protect yourself? Click on the video on the screen to continue this fascinating journey of self-discovery and learning. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more content like this. See you in the next chapter of this incredible adventure.